All right. It's about 8 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, any questions, go ahead and type them in the box. Um, there's no uh, one. Can everyone hear me? Just type somewhere in the chat or the questions. Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. Um, Secondly, can you see my slide, my one slide, self compassion workshop? Could be a little louder. I think this is about as loud as I can get. Um, some people, I don't know if their computers aren't loud enough. Um, One thing that I want to bring up, some people are having trouble accessing the recordings from Dropbox. They either don't have a Dropbox account or don't want to get one. I've tried to do Hightail to send sort of, they're fairly large files, and people have had some trouble with that too. So I'm going to try to. Apparently, I know I've done this before. I just got to remember how to do it. On YouTube, you can have private videos, so I will put them on YouTube. So they're a lot easier to access that way. And I think I just have to send you a link or something to access those. So give me a few days, probably be the weekend before I can get to that. All right. Yeah, Google Drive's another option. Let me try that too. Um, all right. So today is participation night. And the nice thing about participation night is you can participate if you want to, but we don't twist your arm and make you. Um, but we do have a volunteer, uh, Lauren, who has been doing this for, I think we determined about 3.5 or 4 years, um, and has gotten pretty adept at it. So she's going to um, tell us about a situation that she had, which is a perfect example because it's personal and it's personal enough, but it's not too overwhelmingly personal, if you know what I mean. In the meantime, one of the things that I think we're going to talk about next time, because we didn't talk too much about it, and it still is a big part of the program, and that is gratitude. And it's sort of where the program started. So back in 2000, when I left my traditional group and went into this integrative practice that I started myself, um, and I tried to practice sort of in a holistic sense. And part of that, so there was many parts. I developed this program I called the Personal Awareness Program, and that was a problem because one, the program was very let's just call it clunky and cumbersome. It was a lot to do, and people weren't able to really do that very well, and so they included me. So it really didn't work very well. But one part of the program was a gratitude journal, and that part people seemed to like, and it seemed to stick because people got benefit from it. And a large part of this program really um, evolved from that gratitude. The second issue with the program was that the acronym is PAP, and so that wasn't going to fly. I think it was copyright infringement or something. Anyway, so um, the program kind of fell apart over time, but gratitude did stick, and so um, I think what we'll talk about is maybe the use of gratitude, and maybe the limitations. And one of the reasons I don't talk a lot about it now, it's not because it's not helpful, but because again there are some limitations. But that doesn't make it useless. It's still incredibly useful. The interesting thing about gratitude that I found, and one of the reasons I kept developing the program evolved, was when I was doing gratitude, it was incredibly helpful, incredibly useful. The strange part of it, though, was there were times when I was, sitting in my misery, so to speak, and um, and I had been doing the program long enough that I knew gratitude would help. I just literally had to find one thing to be grateful for, and I could break that cycle and feel better, essentially instantly. And I knew that, and I say, okay, just find one thing to be grateful for. Go ahead, anytime. Okay, go ahead. Now's a good time. And as I explored that, what I sort of heard myself saying was, I don't want to, right? I don't want to find something to be grateful for because that will help get me out of my misery, and I want to sit in this misery. And that was really tough because what kind of like sane person wants to sit in their misery when they have a technique that is easy to implement, almost instantaneously give you, improvement. You don't go from from misery to peace, but it lifts you out of that misery to a degree. And yet I was choosing not to do that. And so that's when I really started to wonder about myself. And um, it was a tough time because that was a big realization. Um, so we'll talk about that next time. It'll be a little more lecture type, I guess. Um, so I have to unmute Lauren here. I gotta remember how to do that. Lauren, you there?
Yep. I think you got it.
All right. Amazing technology. So Lauren, as I said, has been doing this for the better part of 3.5, 4 years. And, when she started this, she wasn't necessarily a believer this whole process. And I'll let her say a little bit more, but I think that's a fair way to say it. She had a lot of questions. It wasn't that she didn't believe in it, but it was, and I presented in a very different sort of way back then as well. Anyway, she had a million questions, and that really challenged me to try to describe this. And one of the great things about doing these, sharing my experience and such, is that when people ask me questions, I have to be able to apply the program in their context or in their scenarios and what they, whatever level they're at. And that's, it's fun, but it's also very challenging. Um, so anyway, Lauren challenged me significantly on that. And then over time, I don't think, again, it was, as simple as the program is, it's certainly not easy. The reason I was talking to Lauren a couple of weeks ago, and she brought up a scenario that she's going to talk about that happened at work. And again, I like it because it's personal, yet it's not overwhelmingly personal. That's something that she, you wouldn't, stuff that you wouldn't want out there floating around talking about. Um, so, so anyway, I thought it would be great. We did this Sunday night, and it worked pretty well. So Lauren, if you want to go ahead and fill everyone in, and again, I will interrupt you mostly to go through the steps more than anything else, not because you're off track or anything. So, okay.
Okay, sounds good. Well, hi everyone. So like Julia said, he and I have been talking through sort of this way of thinking and viewing the world, and looking at the different situations that we encounter now for about 3.5 or 4 years. And like he said, I had tons of questions at the beginning, and still sometimes have questions off and on when different things come up about it. And as we'll talk later, as we get kind of more into the different steps of this story, It will come across that like I do a lot of the processing for this type of situation pretty quickly now, but it has certainly not been that way since I started working on this. It's taken time and just continuing to, like Julia says, to play with this way of seeing situations. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, that it certainly has taken some time to kind of get into the groove of seeing situations this way pretty quickly.
So let me say one thing about that also.
Yeah.
Is that this program developed again in sort of many different parts that kind of came together, and one part was the work of Byron Katie, and in Katie's work, which is the 4 questions that we went over I think it was last session. It's very effective. However, it really, if you get really good at it, you kind of can do it in your head really fast, but it's not something that you think of doing sort of on the fly. It's more something you do after the situation's over. And that's the way this starts as well. Usually this is, I had this issue last month, or I've been dealing with this for several weeks or months or years. And then we kind of go through it and you see what you're doing. And then over time, you start to see what you're doing faster and faster. In other words, you start to see it, as I like to call it, in real time. It may not be at that instant. You might still have that negative reaction, but at some point while it's still going on, you start to recognize, oh, I'm doing that thing, right? I call it the victim thingy. And so the more you practice it, the faster you get it. And the reason this isn't a good example that Lauren has is, again, because it was recognized fairly quickly. And so you can see what happened. So go ahead.
Okay. So to kind of set the stage, I was trained in a technical background and had worked several years in a technical career field. And about 6 months ago, I completely changed roles and industries. And now I work in the personal finance industry, and I work in a company that does a lot of marketing campaigns. And I serve that team as a project manager now for these marketing campaigns. So a couple of weeks ago, we have a very big campaign that kicks off in about 2 months. And we needed to have the first meeting where we bring everybody together to get everybody on the same page. So anybody that's going to touch the project comes together in one room, and we set the stage for the project, answer questions, make sure it's clear on responsibility, and then we're off and running. I would say there were about 30 people in this meeting, and I've worked before with about 20 of them pretty regularly. So about 20 or so people, I feel like they know me, they know what I can do, they know what I'm capable of. But about 10 people in that room, I really felt like I was trying to prove myself and make a good impression. So in addition to not being a huge fan of public speaking and having to lead this meeting, and then also the pressure of trying to prove myself, made for kind of just an interesting setup for me going into the meeting. So anyhow, we walk through all of the goals, and one of the goals is simplicity for the user. So the person who comes to this web page, we want their experience to be very clear, and it should be a very simple experience. They shouldn't have to make a lot of decisions. And one of the designers, who I've worked with pretty regularly and we have a good rapport, she raises her hand and says, "Lauren, I just want to call this out. You've said that this goal to have a simple experience for the user is like it's the number 2 goal for this campaign, and yet you don't have anybody in here from user experience that would be whose specialty is in user experience, that would speak into that. So that's a problem. And if this is such an important thing, you need to make sure that you get that person in the conversation." And immediately in my mind, I was just like, seriously? You felt the need to bring that up right here? And I got so angry. I was embarrassed because, of course, like, it's one of the goals. How could I not think to bring somebody in there? My heart rate increased, palms start sweating. I know my face got red, and I was just livid. Like, in my mind, I went to the extreme immediately. Like, what a bitch. How dare you bring that? Like, seriously? Come on. Like, why can't you just ask me after? So that's kind of that's the situation and my initial response to it.
So, so let's go first to the theoretical, which is if we go back 5 years and say, what is the likely scenario of how you would have dealt with that once that happened? So you got embarrassed, you're angry, everyone knows you're embarrassed now because, like we talked about, your face is red, your ears are red. You've kind of, the whole body kind of exudes that embarrassment. And what would have happened, do you think, 4, 5, 6 years ago?
Yeah, so I mean, I've clearly been embarrassed in situations before and had people call stuff out. And I know that in those situations, and would have been sure that in this situation, my face would have gotten red and stayed super red through the meeting. Yeah, I don't, yeah, ears definitely get red anytime I get embarrassed or flushed or anything like that, like bright red. And I had my hair back that day. Crazy fast heart rate. So my voice would have been shaking, trying to like get my breathing and everything under control. And essentially I would have stayed really pissed off over the next like 5 minutes, but would have tried to reel it in. Because I knew like, hey, we were only like 15, 20 minutes into the meeting. We had another 35 or 40 minutes to go. And so I would have been trying not to be angry, crazy embarrassed. My immediate reaction to her would most likely have been just kind of clam up and like, oh yeah, yep, yeah, we need to do that. Okay. And then like, just kind of like shut down and try to get through the meeting. I would have really had wanted to like try to defend myself or be like, well, here's the reason we don't have that. But I know that I wouldn't have ever done that. So I would have beat myself up later for, why didn't you stick up for yourself? Everybody now thinks you're just a pushover and you don't know what you're doing. So the meeting would have just spiraled downward for me because I would have just been trying to keep from being any more embarrassed. So I probably would have stopped answering questions, or I would have hemmed and hawed on things when they were asked.
So you have to sort of,
Yeah.
you're running the meeting, so you have to have, and plus you're brand new, right? I mean, you've been there essentially 6 months.
Yeah.
And so you got to show that you're competent, right? Prove you're competent, and that kind of stuff. And so the first thing, you go into that place of, victimness, right?
Yeah.
She attacked me. I can't believe she did this. She knows me. She could have told me, after the meeting, blah, blah, blah. And so it's easy to see how the meeting would have basically spiraled down. We don't know how bad it would have gotten, but it wouldn't have been, a very successful meeting overall. So the neat thing is, again, with this, let's call it way of thinking. I don't even like to think of it as a program, but with this way of thinking, what you do is you're able to say that everyone comes from the same place. Everyone feels unworthy. Everyone feels not good enough. And everyone, you want to go as far as saying maybe everyone has a level of self-hatred, but you don't even have to go that far. Let's just say everyone feels unworthy and not good enough. So just like Lauren, who was trying to run this meeting, feels not good enough, the girl who said that also feels not good enough. Now, we see this in corporate America all the time, right? People have to prove themselves, right? And so they do it in many different ways. But one of the ways to do it is in meetings to point stuff out that may seem obvious to them that was left out or something like that. So this isn't unusual by any stretch of the imagination. But why she's doing it is, again, to cover up those feelings of not good enoughness or unworthiness. Because, hey, I found something, I'm good. I found something that was missed, essentially is what it's saying. And when you're in these interactions and something like that happens, And you can go to that place and say, well, I know why she said that. So when I sit in meetings, I work in corporate America. When I sit in meetings and these things happen, I literally can go right there, and I'll say, and for me, it's a game. I watch it all the time. I watch everyone, and it's how is he playing out his not good enough? How is she doing it? How is she covering it up? How is he proving it directly? And I sort of look at it in a continuous sort of fashion, and it makes life very, very fun and enjoyable, because we all do it. And then there's always a victimizer and a victim, right? So in this case, that the girl is playing victimizer, right? And Lauren's choosing to play the victim at this point. So where did you go with it then, Lauren, at that point?
So one of the things that Julius and I have talked about that's critical for all of this is recognizing when you are choosing to play the victim, when you're kind of playing out your not enough, not good enough feelings in the world. And one of the ways that I kind of ground myself when I see that, or one of the ways that I notice that that's happening, is paying attention to my physical reactions. Because sometimes the thoughts are so automatic that it's hard to notice them quite as much, but it's easier for me to notice physical sensations. So, immediately I was like, oh my gosh, what a jerk. I can't believe you called this out. But I was feeling my heart rate increase. I could feel my face flush and everything. And at that moment, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm doing I'm putting on a victim hat right now and playing that out in this situation. Okay, I feel no good. I feel like somebody called me out on something I screwed up on. And like, I'm being able to show everybody like, look, I'm not good. I don't know what I'm doing here. That's out in the world for everybody to see.
So let me just interrupt you 1 second. So it's a great point, because everyone recognizes when they're doing this a little bit differently. So for me, I tend to use negative emotion, right? When I'm feeling bad, and again, I don't label the emotion, whether it's anger or rage or irritation, frustration, annoyance, whatever. I don't label it, but all those, you're feeling bad. And so that's how I sort of recognize it. But Lauren brings up a great point, because for other people may notice it different ways, but when you're feeling that negative emotion, then you generally will have a physiologic reaction to that, right? A body reaction. And so you might feel heart rate increasing, or your palms sweating, or you start to feel tense, or maybe you start to get, a tension headache, the muscles in your neck tense up, or one, maybe you get belly pain if you get more like irritable bowel type stuff. I mean, all sorts of things happen. And so you need to pay attention to what is it for you? What's your sign that you're doing the victim thing?
Yeah.
And that's the first place you kind of have to go. That's a premise of this program. With Katie stuff, you answer the questions and you kind of go through it. With this program, you can get to what Katie gets to, but you got to have this. You start with this premise of, everything kind of comes from unworthiness. People behave either trying to cover it up or prove it. So go ahead, Lauren. Sorry.
Yeah. And to that end, I mean, even something like if I catch myself rolling my eyes, that's usually a good indication that I'm annoyed with something somebody's done and I feel like a victim in some way or whatever. So, I mean, like it can be like the real visceral response, or it can be like things I find myself doing. But anyhow, so one of the great things about looking at the world this way is the understanding, like once you understand that you're doing it, to me, or that you're seeing that you're responding to things this way, it makes it easier to think, oh, well, that's exactly how everybody else is behaving too. And it starts to explain other people's behavior. So when I noticed after that like half second of pissed off rage and all the physical responses, and then when I caught myself and realized, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing the victim thing. Oh, that means Nicole, this other gal, is doing the no good thing too. So she's trying to cover it up by calling it out. And that's why she made that comment. It's like, and it automatically answers the question, well, why did she do that? Why did she have to call that out? Because she felt like she needed to cover up her feelings of no good and let everybody know that she's paying attention, and called out something really important.
So when you're in that cycle, okay, that we talked about, I guess it was last week, right? That cycle of that starts with the unworthiness, the not good enoughness, and goes to the victim, and then it goes to the behavior, which creates a story that reinforces the not good enoughness. That cycle, as I said, can be stopped, can be broken at any point, and it's broken through awareness of what you're doing, being open to that, okay, being saying, I am doing, this thing, this victim thing, or I am victimizing. I'm either covering it up or I'm directly proving it. In this case, the girl was directly proving it, right? She's a bitch for doing, what she said. And Lauren's choosing to be the victim of her, direct proof of it or whatever. There was something else I was going to say that was important, but I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I'll let you continue, Lauren.
Okay, if it comes back, just interrupt me. So at the point that I realized that she's doing it too, that kind of gives me the compassion for her, and that pulls me in this situation, pulled me out of that downward spiral.
And that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So the self-compassion comes in first for me, it generally comes in with the other person first, right? So whereas in the old days, I would react the way Lauren would have reacted, which would have been, sort of with, anger or disgust or, being frustrated or something like that. But now when I know why they're doing what they're doing, and they're just like me, they are doing this, they feel like I do, they're doing it their way and I'm doing it my way, but they're just like me. And when I know that, then I can have that compassion for them. So that's where it starts. But more importantly, then the self-compassion comes in. And that part, again, breaks the cycle for you, because ultimately it doesn't matter what she really does. It's really for yourself. And so you can stop beating yourself up saying, oh, I know what I'm doing here. I'm not expected to know everything. What's the big deal, right? That she said this, ultimately she's right. And so that compassion then comes in and can keep everything from spiraling downwards. So go ahead. What happened, Lauren?
Yeah. So with that awareness, and that probably all ran through my head in like a second or two, or kind of still while she was talking and finishing, making her statement. When I realized that, it dawned on me. I was like, oh, okay. Well, okay. Is there any validity then to what she said? So if I can take the situation and have compassion on her and for myself, if it ticked me off so much, it's worth investigating and asking myself, is there any truth to what she just said? And when I asked myself that, yes, absolutely. We needed to have somebody speaking into the experience of the user if that was such a high goal on the list. So what that allowed me to do was, in that moment, to, my physical symptoms like receded quickly. So heart rate calmed, breathing slowed down, that sort of thing. I don't think my face stayed red for all that long. And so I was able to say genuinely, whereas it would have been forced otherwise, like, oh, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Nicole. And so then I was able to go and capture that on our list of things that we needed to do after the meeting. And I think really the best part of it all was after the meeting, Nicole came up to me, excuse me, she came up to me and said, oh, Lauren, really great job in the meeting. Sorry I brought that whole like UX thing up. I don't really know why we needed to talk about it right then, but I just kind of wanted to point that out to everybody. And honestly, like, I'm probably the person that that's going to end up doing that. I've got some background in user experience, so I could probably do that. So to me, it was just hilarious because at the end of the day, she called it out and ended up just assigning herself more work. So that I mean, it made me chuckle.
So, so you can see, so even though, you know, Lauren got it pretty quickly, not exactly in real time because she sort of still had that negative reaction, but pretty quick, fast enough that she was able to, let's call it, turn it around, right? Now, when you start this, you don't start there. Okay, when you start this, you know, it may be 2 weeks later, and you say, "Oh, geez, that was a horrible thing," and you're still seething over it, right? You still might be upset over it 2 weeks later, and then you sit down and you say, "Well, what really happened there?" And then you can start to go through this thing. And say, "Oh, I know what she did. You know, she was doing this to cover up her feelings of unworthiness, and she attacked me like that, so she was proving it directly. I, on the other hand, was playing the victim. I was taking her, you know, threats or her, you know, her aggressive sort of approach, and so I know what I did there, and then I reacted. So I know I was really playing the victim, and then look what happened. The whole meeting kind of fell apart, or whatever happened, right? And I didn't think of saying all these things because I stayed in my head, in my victim head, let's call it. Okay, so that's still beneficial because now you kind of recognize what you did so that the next time something similar happens, you may recognize it earlier. And it might still take, you know, days or what have you. But then it kind of gets faster and faster till you get to the point where as you're sitting there and she says it, you recognize it immediately. It's like your habitual sort of awareness of what it is that she's doing, so that there's no negative reaction on your part at all. You don't feel attacked because you know she's really doing is covering up her own not good enough. It's not personal. You know, in Miguel Ruiz, in his book The Four Agreements, one of the four agreements is don't take anything personally. And again, I love that book, and people read that book and go, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, you shouldn't take anything personally. Oh, that's great. That's great. That's great." But he never tells you how to do it. And I read the four agreements way before I ever came up with this program. And I read it. It was like, oh yeah, rah rah rah. This is neat stuff, you know. But then the next day, I didn't know how to apply any of it, right? And then I forgot about the four agreements, and I went off, you know. And then literally, I think it was 15 years later, or close to it. After I had this program and I was pretty good at it, I went back and read the four agreements, and it all made sense, and everything that I was doing was a method to his four to dealing with his four agreements, like not to take things personally. So I don't take things personally today, not because for any other reason than I know, or I am aware, or at least I think in my head. This is why this is important, because I don't really know for sure, but in my head, my thoughts are she's doing that to cover up her own feelings of not good enoughness. She's not doing it because she's trying to make me look like an idiot. And so as soon as I'm aware of that immediately, then I have no reaction. So then I can sit there and just in the meeting and go, "Oh, that's an excellent point. You're absolutely right. Oh my God, I can't believe, you know, and then I'll probably make a joke about it or who knows what, but I'll say, God, the most important thing, and I left the person out, right? And so that's where, and I don't react, and so the meeting, if anything, it well, what happens at the meeting is it benefits from all of that, right? Because that's really what you want anyway, right? But we get so we buy into so much of the personal stuff. We take everything personally, right? That then we don't get everything out of the meeting that we could have gotten or should have gotten or that it was set up to do. Does that make sense? Okay. Anything else you want to say, Lauren, about that? Or
No, I don't think I have any other comments on that.
okay. So does that make sense at all to anyone or to everyone? Just if you feel like it, type in the chat or in the question yes. And if it doesn't, say no. And if you have a question, type that in. A lot of yeses. That's a good sign. Usually at this point, it's about as clear as mud. Excellent. Okay. Any questions? I'll give you a second. No. Good. All right. So, one of the things we talked about on Sunday night, because we had time, was, and this kind of maybe went off track a little bit, but it's still so important because I'm a physician and I still think of all this stuff from a health standpoint. Um, it kind of came to me Sunday night, and I brought it up, and and I thought it worked okay. But one of the other things that Lauren had been working on. So one of the things she didn't tell you was that she was a collegiate athlete. She played soccer in college, and had knee problems that eventually derailed her career. Really, and so in Western medicine, we believe that if you have a physical symptom, no matter what it is, that there must be a physical problem that is causing it, right? So if you have a headache, then we do MRIs and CT scans to make sure that you don't have brain tumors and all that kind of stuff. And if you're having chest pain, we make sure you don't have not having a heart attack or blockage in your heart or something like that. If you're having belly pain, we make sure you don't have appendicitis or a gallbladder or Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or a kidney stone, right? If you're having back pain, make sure you don't have a herniated disc or some issue like that, right? And so we've got all of this list of stuff. And the truth of the matter is, as you've heard me say, that most of the time, and when I say most, I'm talking like 90% of the time, we don't find anything physical that we can attribute as the etiology of those symptoms. And so then we just give it a fancy name like migraine or irritable bowel or mitral valve prolapse syndrome or lumbago or sciatica or chronic fatigue or what have you, because which basically just means you've got symptoms and we're not smart enough to figure it out, and so it becomes a real uh, a real challenge. So you heard me talk a little bit about the the lady who was having the nausea and vomiting for 3 days or whatever that came in. Well, sometimes it's always not necessarily that dramatic. So for me, back before around 1999, because I opened the Integrative Cardiology Center in 2000, I looked into opening the Integrative Cardiology Center, and it was going to be way too expensive. And I didn't have that kind of money. And I was going to have to borrow a lot of money, and I really didn't want to do that. So I pretty much put it, it was a passion that I had, but I put it out of my mind and I said, just forget it. Just keep doing what you're doing. I was working at I left the big group. I was working at a small hospital in Eden, North Carolina, right on the border with Virginia, and it was fine. It wasn't what I had a passion to do, but I was good at it, and it was working okay. And I developed this hip pain, and over time, it kind of got worse and worse over, about 3 or 4 weeks, to where it was really, really uncomfortable. I could go upstairs, but I couldn't go downstairs very well, and it was just really miserable. And so I said, well, I better go see a doctor because this has been like 4 weeks now. It's not going away. And with my luck, I probably got some horrible thing like, osteosarcoma or avascular necrosis or, whatever. Because I'm a doctor, of course, you always go there. And so I went to see a friend of mine, and he does x-rays and stuff. And he says, everything looks normal. And I said, well, that's reassuring. And I didn't ask him, well, why does it hurt? Because I knew he would know. So he gave me some pain medicine, and I said, well, thank you. And I left. And, the pain medicine, again, is just sort of that cover up, right? We cover the pain, but you don't deal directly with it. The pain continued to get worse over the next couple of weeks to where I really kind of couldn't stand it. I went to see a chiropractor who was also a friend of mine, and he starts telling me, "Oh, you got this halgus valgus rotation, all this kind of stuff." And I was like, "Whatever. Can you just fix it?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, but you're gonna have to come like twice a week." And I said, "Okay, fine." So anyway, I went twice a week for some period of time, and it really wasn't. It was continuing to get worse. So one night I was trying to sleep, I just couldn't get comfortable in bed, and I was just miserable. So I go and I lay on the couch, and I've got it was my right leg, and I've got my right leg propped up on the back of the couch, and I'm trying to get in some position where this thing doesn't hurt, and I can't. So, and I don't really like to take medicine, but I was like so miserable. So I finally get up and I take some medicine, and I'm waiting for it to kick in. And while I'm waiting for it to kick in, I start thinking about the integrative cardiology, what became the Integrative Cardiology Center, a holistic, integrative kind of focus center. And I thought, like it would be neat. Who would be there? How would we practice? What would it be like? And all that kind of stuff. And then the medicine kind of kicked in after maybe 30 or 40, 50 minutes, whatever it was. And I said, I think I can fall asleep. And I was exhausted. And I slept. I got on the couch and I got my leg up again and I was able to fall asleep. The next day, I sat down and actually wrote out some stuff about this practice. What would it be like, and who would be there, and what kind of therapies would we have, and services and what have you. And we ended up having, acupuncture and Chinese medicine, massage therapy, naturopathic medicine. We had nutrition. We had counseling. We had yoga and tai chi, and I was the MD or whatever, and it was really neat. But anyway, so I wrote some of that stuff out. So then the following day, I realized I had no hip pain, none at all, like zero. And I was like, well, that's weird. I said, it's gone. I said, "What?" I said, did I have it yesterday? And I said, I don't know. After you have some pain for such a long time, you kind of start to, ignore it. And so I was like, geez, I don't know. I said, I know I had it Monday night, and I'm not sure about yesterday, but it's gone today. I have no idea why, but thank God it's gone. Oh my God, I'm going to go celebrate. So I was thrilled. About a week later, a friend of mine who was a massage therapist comes over and brings over this copy of this book by Louise Hay called Heal Your Body. And it's a neat book. And when I say a copy, I mean literally like a photographic, photostatic copy of the book. It's stapled together. And that book is a little book, and it basically looks at illnesses and symptoms that are occurring, and it ties it to some emotional um, place, some emotion that you're having. And so we're going through the book, and we're kind of laughing about this and thinking it's interesting, and don't know really what to make of it, because they certainly didn't teach me this in medical school, right? And so I said, "Oh, what about hip pain? I had all this hip pain. What does hip pain mean?" And he looks it up and he says, "Difficulty making decisions to move forward in life." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." And I was like, I guess the hip moving forward, it moves you forward. I see where it comes from, but I can't buy into this. I mean, I'm a scientist. What does like having difficulties making decision to move forward in life have to do with hip pain? I mean, really, come on. Hip pain is due to arthritis and torn labrums uh, and inflammation and such. So I sat with that for a long time, and eventually became open to it. And then I found another book um, that's called "Feelings Buried Alive Never Die" by Carol Trueman, Carol with a K. And that book's more extensive. I've never read the whole book, but she's got a section in there of these symptoms and illnesses. And Louise Hay's just got one line in it. She's got several lines, like 3, 4, 5, 6 different things that could relate to give you somewhere to start. Because again, where do you start with this, right? Again, it's not something we're taught. It's not something we necessarily believe in our society. So I learned through trial and error, and like I said, I was sort of just flying by the seat of my pants in working on this stuff. um I started temporally. So what what is going on. This started 6 weeks ago. What was going on in your life 6 weeks ago? And then looking at what the issue, where the symptom was, and relating it to, some emotional sort of issue. And and it became somewhat fun, but it gave me a place to start, if nothing else. And so I became very open to it and very sort of intrigued by it. Never, I didn't put a lot of credence into it, but I can't tell you how often um, I've used it very successfully in treating patients or talking to patients about this. So one day in talking to Lauren, she told me about these knee issues she had, and told me about, and she'll tell you about all this degeneration she has. And that's what she was told. That's what doctors say. Oh, you got all this arthritis degeneration. That's why you've got pain. You're going to need, knee replacements, early on in life, or, they give you all this stuff that's just, I don't know why they tell you that stuff. But go ahead if you want to describe a little bit, Lauren, about what your knee pain was like, and the amount of degeneration you had, and the surgeries and stuff.
Sure. So I remember knee pain starting when I was 5 years old. I was being a little rebel and running up the slide backwards. And when I got to the very top, I remember taking that last step and felt the sharp pain all through the middle of my knee. And I had that issue off and on as I was growing up. And that pain got more frequent as I got into late middle school and early high school. And when I was in my junior year of high school, I was in a game and either got tripped or somehow I fell funny on my knee and ended up spraining my PCL in my right knee, my posterior cruciate ligament. And as I took a little time for that to heal up, just a few weeks off, when I started getting back into training again, I noticed this strange pressure in different places in my knee. And it would sometimes be on one side, like towards the middle of my knee, then it would move to the other side. And eventually, probably after a week or so of just feeling this pressure and feeling like there was something moving around in my knee, I was in a game, I was running down the field, and I felt that pressure moving around really quickly. And then all of a sudden my knee locked. And when I tried to bend my leg again, sharp pain, and I couldn't actually bend my knee. So I ended up falling to the ground, had to kind of hit my knee a few times, and then it finally unlocked and I could bend my knee again. And so this happened several times, which was new for me, and because it knew knee issues. And so we ended up going back to the orthopedic surgeon. They did some x-rays and eventually some MRIs. And what the surgeon came back with was, well, it looks like you have a degenerative bone condition that doesn't typically affect people until they're in their 70s or 80s. But because you grew up playing sports, and a high impact sport like soccer, you have accelerated the degeneration process. And that pressure that you're feeling in your knee, and the reason that your knee is locking, is because your bone is crumbling. The end of your femur is crumbling. You've got a hole in your femur, and the bone and cartilage that should be filling in that hole is now broken up into pieces and floating around your knee and causing problems. And so they think that when I was tripped earlier and fell and sprained the PCL, that it dislodged some of the bone. So I ended up having, excuse me, 2 different surgeries in my junior year on my right knee to remove some of the debris in my knee. And they said that most likely, if I have the issue in my right knee, I probably have the same issue in my left knee. Well, sure enough, sophomore year of college, I took a tumble, and then after the training session, took a nap, got up, and apparently during my nap, something had moved. My knee was swollen. I couldn't bend it, so I had to have surgery and actually redshirt that entire year. And that eventually led to me coming back even slower than I was before, to the point where I worked as a student coach rather than actually play my senior year. And then beyond that, I had another surgery on my right knee my second year of graduate school. So I was playing kickball, playing dodgeball, playing racquetball, and just the high impact stuff started causing more problems for me again. So
a lot of surgery, a lot of degeneration,
yes.
a lot of swelling and knee problems. So
Mhm.
anyway, so no, Lauren told me something about this. She was having some issue with her knee or something, and I just mentioned to her, something to the effect of, well, that's due to your difficulty with the lack of flexibility that you have, and of course, she was thinking of it from a sort of physical perspective. I was thinking of it from an emotional perspective. So, I got the book out and I told her, the knee represents flexibility, and you're, very rigid. You have difficulty with flexibility, not wanting to bend, usually to authority. Your ego gets in the way, pride gets in the way, things like that. Stubborn, and I think fortunately we had been talking long enough that she had developed enough respect that she didn't tell me this guy's a complete kook and just I'm never talking to him again. Because probably if we had the conversation the first meeting, that probably would have happened, I suspect. Um, in fact, I'm pretty sure. Lauren. So I think I don't remember the exact conversation, but something like, what are you talking about? And so I went over this. I told her probably my story, and I went over this kind of stuff, and I said, you've got nothing to lose by looking at things in this way. And plus, there were a lot of things going on in her life at that time that would sort of support this, that why she was having increasing knee pains. And then, so what happened from there?
Yeah. So Julius directed me to that Heal Your Body book and Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And he, over the course of probably a few months, so first he just gave me
knowing Lauren, she probably also read the whole book.
Well, there might be that too, but I didn't want to be a total nerd here to everybody.
Sorry.
Thanks for ratting me out. Yeah. So Julius gave me the kind of just the descriptors that go with the different areas of the body from both of those books. And one of the ways that I process really well is by writing things out. So I journal a lot. And essentially, I just started going to town journaling about these words, about what lack of flexibility or stubbornness or pride or ego looked like in my life. How do I play that out? How am I stubborn? How am I inflexible? And over the course of all that too, I don't remember if I asked or if Julius asked or whatever it was, but like somehow we got to the point that, the majority of the issues with my knees tended to focus more on my right knee. So I was like, well, if I'm going to be, journaling about this sort of airy-fairy stuff in general, let's go all the way and talk about the right side of the body. And does the right side mean anything versus the left side? And there were some specific comments in the Feelings Buried Alive Never Die about it's about releasing and letting go. The right side of the body also represents masculine energy, men, and the father. And as my knee issues had escalated, even after my last surgery, to the point where like just walking around every day was causing me pain, I was like, well, or through all of this time too, when it had gotten worse and worse just in my day-to-day life, I was also dealing with a dating relationship that had just increasingly gotten worse and worse in a variety of ways. So basically, I spent a lot of time journaling about all of these different topics.
Yeah. And then how's the knee pain today?
Yeah, so I have not had that brand of knee pain that I have experienced the majority of my life. I have not had that in what, like 2.5 years now? Or no. About 2 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty much since I did all of that several months of intensive journaling around it. And right about the end of that time period where I was doing all the journaling around it, that dating relationship also ended. Left that relationship, and that I can think of that as what was happening in my life when I stopped having that knee pain. So I kind of go back to, okay, it's definitely a stubbornness thing. It's stubbornness when it comes to men, particularly that dating relationship. So it'll be interesting to me to stay aware of what type of knee pain I have if next serious relationship that I'm in.
Yeah. So this is a little bit, again, off topic, but I bring it up because, again, this is where the self-compassion still has to come in, right? At some point, even even if you're going to go this way, and again, it just gives you something else to look at, something else to play with besides, the issue in medicine today, amongst other things, is, that in Western medicine, we have this belief: you're sick, I'm not feeling well, I'm going to go to the doctor, and I expect two things of him. First, I expect him to figure out what's wrong. And next, I expect him to fix it. Right. And so if you look at the doctor's toolbox to fix things, right, you open up the lid and there's that first tray, and that first tray is procedures, right? Surgeries, different procedures. And if you need that, okay, great. But if you don't need surgery, which most of the time people don't, you take out that tray. The only thing left in the toolbox is pharmaceuticals. There's nothing else in there, right? For the doctor to give you to fix you or to make you feel better. And so, again, I was trained in pharmaceuticals. I'm not opposed to them. However, it's something, again, outside of you. You're going to the doctor. You're turning over your entire health care to him, and you're not. And Americans tend to not want to do anything for themselves, to take care of themselves, right? Just give me a pill because it's a lot easier, right? And so, so this is just simply another form. So you can look at, okay, I need to take care of myself. What does that mean? Well, we really don't know what it means, but generally it means being more active, right? Walking more, exercising more, eating better, whatever eating better is. Because again, I'm not sure anyone really knows that either, but maybe it just means staying away from processed foods. And and then fine, we understand all that physical stuff. Oh, wear a seatbelt. That's always a fun one. But what about from the emotional, mental, kind of spiritual sense? What do I do for myself there? And of course, there's a lot of things you can do, but this is just one more thing where you can. It's just a, a, a practice session or a play session that you can do with yourself to see, every time these things are going on, I get this pain, headache, back pain, neck pain, whatever it is, knee pain. And what can I do with that? How can I look at this and just become aware of it and let it in? Don't just discount it, but look at it very openly, not as, to get defensively like, oh, this is crazy. Because again, should have said this is crazy, because that certainly wasn't any way I was trained in. I didn't receive any kind of training whatsoever in this in medical school. Right. And so I'm not saying if you're sitting there laying with appendicitis or a heart attack that you should figure out what's going on emotionally. Absolutely. Absolutely not. Go get your appendix taken care of, your heart taken care of, whatever issue is going on. But again, for all of these chronic issues, this gives you something else that you can do. And that's where, again, the compassion has to come in, the self-compassion, because ultimately you have to say, I know what I'm doing here. I'm feeling not good enough. I'm beating myself up. In Lauren's case, you're talking about, the relationship with men and things like that. But wherever it is in your life, being willing to look at it and openly, without getting defensive, and in this loving, compassionate sort of way, just like you would do with your best friend. But it's a lot harder to do with you. And so that's where, again, the self-compassion comes back in. So it's not completely off topic. It still is part of the same process. Ultimately, it's self-compassion that really is the key to all this. If we just did nothing else but treated ourselves, nicer, more humanely, the way we treat some of our friends, then it would the world would be a better place. Okay. Any other questions? Lauren typed the name of the book and the author in there, and I did too because I didn't see she did it, so it's in there twice. I hope that makes sense. So I think next week, again, we'll probably still do a Sunday and a Tuesday. We'll probably do the gratitude talk unless something comes up. Again, if something does come up, please feel free to email me something you want to talk about, and we can talk about it offline to make sure that you feel comfortable with it, or if it's appropriate or not to talk about it. But again, you can see from Lauren's example, again, it's not some big hairy sort of personal issue, but yet personal enough that, and it's a everyday kind of scenario, which I love because, well, these things literally come up every day, and you can see where this kind of technique can help you with that as well, not just the big things or whatever. All right, I hope that's helpful. Can you think of anything else, Lauren, that you want to say or forgot, or that I forgot?
The only thing that I would just call out is that for me, the self-compassion piece, one of the ways that really worked for me to understand how to be self-compassionate, like show compassion towards myself, is exactly what you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, is how would you treat a friend? Like, what would you say to a friend that was trying not to get down on themselves or trying not to beat themselves up about it? What sort of attitude would you take towards them? That's the kind of attitude that I took towards myself. I'd say, okay, what would I say to a friend? Then I'd turn it around to myself. And for me, that was when I was in the space to try and be self-compassionate. That was the, I guess, method that I used. Yeah. That'd be the only thing.
Thanks. Yeah, there's many ways to sort of bring the self-compassion in, and you got to find what works for you. But at the end of the day, you got to find a way to do it, because it's critically important to this process. Now, when I say critically important, most of you are doing just fine, right? You can go and live your life the way you're doing it, and you'll be okay, right? But if you really want to understand what's going on, and I'd like to say eliminate the misery, but certainly make life more fun and less miserable and more peaceful, this process I have found incredibly helpful. Okay. Anything else? Wonderful. Well, then I will I'll send something out. I've got to travel again this week. Tomorrow I'll be back Thursday, so I'll probably send something out Friday, the invitation, but plan again for Sunday at 7 and Tuesday at 8. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.